A pandemic, devastating wildfires, and misinformation online. We are looking at an election season like no other.
And here at ABC 10, we stand for you. So for the next half hour, we're going to talk about how to make sure your vote is counted and protected.
We really need to have our guard up a little bit on content in social media.
Do you know how to protect yourself from misinformation online? And where can you go to make sure you make an informed decision?
We're breaking down your voting options based on where you live and how to make sure you're voting safely.
We are making extraordinary efforts in order to create a safe voting experience.
This ABC 10 special edition starts right now. Thanks for joining us. I'm Madison Wade.
And I'm Chris Thomas. We hope to bring you a lot of answers tonight. And keep in mind, we want to hear from you. What questions do you have about the voting process this year? You can text your questions to 916-321-3310. We'll be getting answers to viewers' questions with the California Voter Foundation in just about 10 minutes. There is a lot to keep track of this election, but as we get started, there are a few key election dates to keep in mind.
First, registration deadlines. The very last day to register to vote by mail or by online is October 19th. You can still register to vote in person, but you do have to go to your local voting center or a local election office.
Ballots will be mailed to all registered voters in California starting on October 5th. You should receive yours by October 16th.
And finally, Election Day, which is November 3rd. This is the final day to vote in person or return your mail-in ballot. We want to make sure you have all the information you need ahead of Election Day. So if you have any questions, just text the word VOTE to 916-321-3310. We have an online election guide and all the resources we can send directly to your phone. The number for that is at the bottom of your screen.
Now, there are a lot of changes to the way we vote this election, many of those because of the coronavirus pandemic. ABC 10's Andy Judson has a closer look at what you need to know.
This year, every registered voter in California will receive a ballot by mail. Now, there's a variety of ways to turn in that ballot. Here's how to make sure your vote is counted. First of all, you can simply mail it back. Election officials recommend you have your filled out ballot in the mail by October 22nd for it to be included in election night results. But you have up until Election Day to have your ballot in the mail postmarked for it to be included. You can also sign up online and track your ballot in the mail by using ballot tracks. For Sacramento residents who'd rather just drop it off, you can do that at 58 different ballot drop-box locations across the county, including all Raley's and Bel Air stores. You can also drop it off at any of the 84 voting center locations, or if you'd rather vote in person, you can forego your mail ballot by going to a voting site. In Sacramento County, we have universal voting, which means you can cast your vote at any voting site starting October 24th. In other counties in the Central Valley, early voting begins October 31st. When you show up to vote in person, they will give you a new ballot. In light of COVID-19, new safety precautions are being taken, like social distancing, sanitation, and PPE. And with those new safety measures and not as many people being allowed to vote at one time, a longer wait time is something to keep in mind if you do choose to vote in person. Because of that wait, election officials are recommending you review your voter guide ahead of time so you know what your votes are going to be once you're in the booth.
And you heard Andy mention the 84 vote centers in Sacramento County. The biggest one will be at the Golden One Center in downtown Sacramento. The arena will be open for voting from October 24th through Election Day on November 3rd. At the vote center, any Sacramento County resident can vote in person, register to vote, update registration, or get a new ballot printed out. Those services are just for voters in Sacramento County. However, voters from anywhere in the state will be able to drop off their completed ballot at Golden One Center.
And keep in mind, how and when you vote can vary depending on where you live. We'll hear from election officials in several counties in the next half hour about their local election process. Let's start tonight with San Joaquin County.
They have a lot more options on how to return their ballot. Vote by mail is kind of a misnomer. We mail the ballot out, but you don't have to return it by mail. There are several options.
For voters in San Joaquin County, those options include returning your ballot in the mail, dropping it off at one of 26 ballot drop boxes, or if you want to vote in person, you can do that at the registrar's office or one of 34 voting service centers. The voter service centers open on October 31st, meaning you'll have 4 days to cast your vote in person. One thing all counties are warning about is how long it could take to get results. Ballots can be mailed in or dropped off right up until polls close at 8 p.m. on election night. So it might be days or even weeks before all the ballots can be counted.
We tell folks that on election day and election night, after the final semi-official results are posted, you know, if a candidate is feeling in a good position with a large margin, go ahead and buy that bottle of champagne. But don't open it. Put it on ice. Don't open it until the election is certified. And that comes 30 days after the election day.
If you want your vote to be part of the election night returns, the best advice is to return your ballot as early as possible.
And before you vote in this election, you do need to know what and who you're voting for. Mike Duffy talked with Kim Nalder from the Sacramento State University's Project for an Informed Electorate and to get to more advice on how to become a more educated voter.
How do I choose a candidate?
Listen to the candidates themselves and what they're saying, but not just what they're saying, look at their records. Another nice shortcut is to look up interest groups maybe that you belong to or that you believe in their mission. They often rate candidates who've been in office already. So if you love the NRA and the NRA gives that person 100 out of 100, then you know to vote for them. If you don't like the mission of the NRA and that person gets 100 out of 100, you don't want to vote for them.
What voting resources would you recommend?
The League of Women Voters has a smart voter guide that's really helpful. The official voter guide from the Legislative Analyst's Office outlines the races, gives you information about the candidates, tells you about the initiatives. The organization I run, the Project for an Informed Electorate, does an initiative explainer. Many news organizations do initiative explainers.
What's the problem with social media?
Social media is a landmine. You can get good information. Any news organization's content can be posted on social media. But one of the big problems with social media is that you feel more trusting towards content that's posted by people you know. We really need to have our guard up a little bit on content in social media because it may be a purposeful disinformation or misinformation. It may be an attempt to mislead you on purpose.
Is the other side evil?
Sometimes candidates or political figures will speak about the candidates from the other side as if they're demons of some sort, or they're evil. So, take that with a grain of salt. It's unlikely that most of your fellow Americans are, out to destroy the country, for example. Like, if you hear statements like that, maybe think twice about the reality.
And they are some of your most common questions, from deadlines to when you can expect your ballot and actually start voting. We have the dates you need to know just ahead. Welcome back. When it comes to voting here in California this year, there are many ways to do it and many deadlines you need to be aware of.
And ABC 10's Andy Jetson has a closer look at the important dates to know.
You may have heard the term vote early this election season, but when exactly is that here in California? Well, we compiled the list of all the dates that you need to know starting in the beginning of October. If you're registered to vote this year in California, you will receive a ballot in the mail. For those of you who are already registered to vote, you can start watching for your ballot in October. They'll be mailed out starting October 5th. If you haven't gotten your ballot by Friday, October 16th, election officials recommend that you call your local elections office to ensure that everything is okay with your registration. Now, for those of you who haven't registered to vote yet, October 19th is your deadline. That Monday is the cutoff date for voter registration in order to receive a ballot in the mail. You'll still be able to register in person up till Election Day. There's a couple different ways and dates to keep in mind in regards to returning your ballot to ensure that your vote is counted. If you're planning on mailing it back, Sacramento County election officials are encouraging that you have it back in the mail by October 22nd for it to be included in election night results. However, you do have until Election Day to get it postmarked and in the mail for it to be counted. However, it will probably take longer for election officials to include votes if they come in later. If you're one of those people that was already registered and got your ballot, you can begin dropping off your filled out ballot as early as October 5th. Specifically in Sacramento County, that's when 58 ballot drop box locations will begin accepting those ballots. This includes all Raleigh and Bel Air stores, as well as Sacramento County public libraries. If you don't want to wait for your ballot in the mail, October 5th is also the day you can go to the election county office and pick up your ballot. And if you don't want to deal with mail by ballot at all, you can still vote in person starting October 31st throughout the Central Valley. But some counties like Sacramento will open their vote centers starting earlier on October 24th. Finally, it's probably the date you already knew, but Election Day is November 3rd. You can still vote in person that day or drop off your ballot, and even if you missed that registration date, you can go on Election Day and both register and vote in person. But election officials do want you to know that there may be more of a wait because of safety measures and social distancing required. Because everyone has the opportunity to vote by mail, election officials will continue to accept ballots that were postmarked by or before Election Day until November 20th. They have until December 1st to certify all election results.
Now, we know there are a lot of dates and information to keep track of, so we have put together online election resources to help. Just text the word VOTE to 916-321-3310 and we'll send it straight to your phone.
As we look at changes for the voting process this year, we now want to focus on Placer County. The big change is instead of traditional polling places, voters will have access to 28 voter service centers. These centers open on October 31st and will be open through Election Day. People can also vote at the Placer County Elections Office or the Elections Warehouse. There will also be 27 ballot drop-off locations, and mail-in is also an option.
In some ways, it's not going to be very different at all, because in Placer County, we have nearly 80% of our voters that are signed up as permanent vote-by-mail voters already. So for those voters, that experience isn't going to be much different. But for voters that prefer to vote traditional polling place manner, then those voters will go to the voter service center if they choose. And they will vote on a touchscreen voting device, which will print a paper ballot.
And to keep people safe, the vote centers will be disinfected regularly, and the touchscreen ballots will be cleaned after each use.
Coming up, we are getting answers to some of your questions, including what you can do to make sure your mail-in ballot is counted. Okay, I want to bring in Kim Alexander now with the California Voter Foundation. Here at ABC 10, we stand for you and we are working to get your questions answered. We had you text in questions that you had for us to 916-321-3310. And so here are some of those questions. A viewer is concerned, Kim, that if they return their ballot in the mail, it might be rejected. So let's talk about why ballots get rejected, how often it happens, and what a voter can do if their ballot is rejected.
That is a great question. We actually just released a new study on ballot rejection on our website at calvoter.org, and we looked at the reasons why ballots are rejected in Sacramento and 2 other counties. Being too late is a top reason for rejection, along with forgetting to sign the envelope or your signature not sufficiently matching your signature on file. Now, if you forget to sign your envelope or your signature is found to not match your voter registration signature, your county is required to contact you and provide you a chance to submit a valid signature so your ballot will be counted and not rejected. But if your ballot's late, there is no way to recover from that.
You know, one of the other things we keep hearing this year, Kim, that we should plan for election week instead of election night. And one viewer wants to know, why does it take so long to count the ballots?
When we have all these ballots now coming in inside envelopes, as opposed to people voting at voting sites, voting regular ballots, every envelope bears a voter's signature that has to be verified before that envelope is open and the ballot extracted and tabulated. So that takes a lot of time. It's very, very labor intensive. You know, we're looking at this election as really being an election month, not election day, because voting starts on October 5th, and we really want people to vote as early as possible.
I've got 30 seconds left. I have one quick question. Can election officials stop folks from voting if they don't have a mask?
No, they cannot. But there will be masks and other PPE available at all voting sites, and voters will be encouraged to use those. And there also will be social distancing. So you may see long lines if you wait till election day to vote.
That is a good point. Some have suggested even bringing a chair or something to eat to wait if you have to. That's why we wanted to have Kim Alexander with the California Voter Foundation on to answer your questions tonight. Kim, we thank you.
And when it comes to voting, it is important to be informed, but unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. ABC 10's Mike Duffy shows us some ways to spot it.
It's election season, and we know there's a lot of misinformation out there. So much so, sometimes it's hard to distinguish fact from that misinformation. So we reached out to Professor Kim Nalder, director of the Project for an Informed Electorate at Sac State, to help us sort it out. She says you can spot misinformation in a variety of ways. First, does it appeal to your emotions, to your partisanship in particular? In other words, if it feels too good in a partisan way, that should be a red flag. Second, does it say something like, I'm going to let you in on a secret, or they don't want you to know this? If it does, it's trying to appeal to our desire to be an insider or part of the group. That's another red flag. Third, is the misinformation demonizing a person or an entire group? Professor Nalder says it's highly unlikely your fellow Americans are actually trying to destroy the country. So if you're starting to feel that way, that's a red flag. And in case you're looking for a simple tool to detect misinformation, do a quick search online to see if there are other sources covering that same story. If not, it's probably not legitimate. Neutralizing misinformation may take a few extra seconds of your time, but in the end, we'll all benefit from a healthier, better informed society.
And you know, another part of being informed is knowing when and where to vote. In Stanislaus County, they have moved to more central voting locations called satellite offices.
So for a satellite office, because of the coronavirus, we had to have the social distancing also. So they had to be larger locations than your typical polling location would be. So you'll find that they're in locations that have more room, more space, so that you can have that social distancing aspect. So say your neighbor's garage would not have worked anymore.
Voters in Stanislaus County will have access to 27 satellite offices opening on October 31st. There are also 18 ballot drop boxes, 5 curbside locations where you can drop off your ballot or you can return it by mail.
There have been a lot of questions this election season about voting accuracy. Up next, we get an inside look at the voting process and the steps election officials take to protect the vote. Welcome back. Voting is the right of every citizen, but this year there's been a lot of questions about how the system is working.
That's right. It is important to ensure your vote is not only counted, but also not counted twice. ABC 10's Andy Judson has been working with election officials to show us what they are doing to protect the vote.
We've had to adapt and change to a lot in 2020 so far, but what about elections and voting? This year, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, all registered voters in California will receive a ballot in the mail. But this isn't all that new to Sacramento County.
Once we implemented the Voters' Choice Act in 2018, we started automatically mailing a ballot to every active registered voter in the county. So our voters are a little bit more familiar with this right now.
That means that Sacramento County already had a system in place to ensure the accuracy of each and every vote they receive in the mail.
With the vote by mail process, there's actually different layers of security. It goes through 10 different steps to ensure every ballot is carefully reviewed and processed.
Sending your ballot is the first step. Election officials send your ballot from a secure facility in Arizona, which is certified to print official California ballots that have specific tints and watermarks. The second step is someone votes either by mail, dropping off their ballot, or in person. Third, the county election office receives that filled out ballot and transports them to the main office using a chain of custody forms, serialized seals, and 2 people are with the ballots at all times. 4, the election office reviews ballots by pulling out any ballots that are missing signatures or belong to another county so they can notify the voter or send the ballot to the correct county. 5. Ballots go through a mail sorter which photographs the return envelope, as well as sorts ballots by precinct and weight to ensure multiple ballots are not returned in one envelope. 6. Signature and eligibility verification is the next step, with each voter's signature on the return envelope being compared to the one on the voter file. This is where election officials ensure voter ballots cannot be counted twice by voting in person and mail, or by voting in multiple places in California.
If that signature matches, we will count the ballot. If it doesn't, we will actually reach out to the voter to see if we can get it corrected. If a voter forgets to sign their return envelope, we'll also reach out to the voter. So if we do notice something is wrong or missing with the voter's vote by mail ballot, we will actually reach out to them to get it corrected.
7. Ballots are then removed from the envelope by a machine. 8. Ballots are unfolded and checked for damages before being counted. 9. Now ballots are counted by a machine. When in doubt, a process called adjunction tries to determine intent, like crossouts or other potential mistakes. The final step is auditing. This is where election officials ensure the number of ballots they have in-house matches the voter file participation history. They also conduct a random tally to ensure ballots are being counted correctly. But don't just take my word for it. The Sacramento County Registrar of Voters says you can come on in and check out their process for yourself.
We're also working to combat a lot of the misinformation and myths out there over mail ballots or the vote by mail process. So we welcome voters to come in, watch our process, and our process is completely open and transparent.
Well, thank you again for joining us. We hope we made navigating this election season a little easier.
And don't forget, if you have any questions, you can always text us at 916-321-3310. Good night.